I've got both screens sort of showing on there. So I'm live on Twitch. Hiya, Twitch. Yeah, we're still waiting for the old YouTube to kick in. Whether it does or not, I don't know. But the last time that I stopped it because the stream didn't start, it had actually started going to YouTube as well. So I'll just carry on as though it is. I'm still learning the ropes, so take it easy on me. I'm Bank Slayer. I've had a bit of a run-in and gotten to know the law from a nasty perspective when our bank took us out. I say they took us out because they took my husband's lifetime of work. And my husband, back in the day before, there were all of these laws about what employers could and couldn't do. My husband was working 16-hour days regularly. He worked for 4 years, 7 days a week, 16-hour days, without a holiday. When some of the young people say, old people got everything, fuck off. Just fuck off. When you're doing it the way that we did it, bugger all money for hard work. He did long, long hours, never got to see the family. He sacrificed a lot. He sacrificed his life for us, and then the bank came along and took the lot. I am not going to play those games with you. You know what? When you're old and grey, you too will have a lot of shit because you'll have a lifetime to accumulate it. And if I do my job properly here, then you won't get taken to the cleaners by the bank. It's as simple as that. So, yeah, it's still not showing up, but I don't care. It's, I've got a chat showing up. Don't know if that's going to work. Don't know if there's anybody out here. Is there someone out here? Oh, maybe. Yeah, probably not. But anyway, that's beside the point. I'm just going to keep talking to myself. I'm pretty bloody good at it. Sometimes you want to have a really good conversation, say, who better than yourself? God, that sounds cheesy. Anyway, the face is red because, had a spa. My hair's still wet because, it's got time for all that preening. I look at some of these girls getting around now and they're done up fabulously. And how do you get the energy for that? I barely have the energy to, get out of bed some mornings. Still, that's beside the point. So today's live stream, as you can tell by the title, I want to talk a bit about social media and you and the law. So when I was working as a lawyer, you'd have people show up and they would either have a whole load of Facebook posts that they said proved their point, or they wanted to know how to get all of the Facebook posts. There was always something about it. And this was around about the time that the case of one of the principals of a high school in Queensland was becoming a bit more talked about. So it was kind of relevant. As I say, my first degree is in internet communications, which I often call it my Facebook degree because you dealt so much with social media and how to use it to get your point across, how to use it for activism. The problem is that there's also a legal side where if you're doing your activism the wrong way, you can find yourself on, the sharp end of the pineapple, so to speak, of a defamation case. And that's what happened in this case. Let me just pull up some of my info so that I can give you some of the citations. So the case I'm talking about is Bros and Baluskas and others, which was finally decided in 2020. But there'd been a lot of talk about it since it first started. So what happened is a school principal was suspended with pay while they investigated some of the complaints made against her, and one of the parents who was on her side decided to start up a Facebook group and a change.org campaign to get her reinstated, because, lots of people were really positive about the principal and what she was doing. So this person sort of thought, well, we'll get this out there and we'll get the education department to really understand how parents feel. And the way that these things go, it kind of went a bit pear-shaped, where despite the overwhelming majority of people who commented on both the change.org and the Facebook group pages were positive in support of the principal, you had the outliers, the people who were upset with her behaviour, who didn't like what she was doing, who thought that she was a bit of an authoritarian and, had no clue what was going on and treated their child like shit, basically. So they were a bit offended about this whole thing. Now, I've not seen any of the posts. I haven't read all of the supporting documents, and there's a fair bit of history behind it. I mean, the one that I've got in front of me now, that's number 6. So the courts have heard a lot of things beforehand going to this. And if you read this particular case, like number 6, it says, she's awarded $6,000, which you sort of think, well, that's not much, That's a whole lot of work for nothing. But some of the defendants had actually settled out of court before then, and she got something in the area of $180,000 between the people who'd settled with her. And I mean, she had a lot of court costs. Everybody had court costs. The first and second defendant who ended up having to pay her $6,000, they were a married couple. So the wife had to pay $3,000 and the husband had to pay $3,000. They had some legal representation along the way. They got legal opinions by the sound of it. And then they self-represented at trial. And they only had to pay like $6,000, and they were barred from ever talking about what happened, about the principal, about anything that she did, ever on social media. They weren't allowed to comment. And, you'd sort of think, oh, well, that's not too bad considering, the others paid out $182,000. But they still went bankrupt. It still cost them everything that they had. And you sort of think, you really have to be careful how you do your social activism on Facebook and other social media. So when I first started doing the Bank Slayer, and I knew nothing about the law, I would be really careful to just say, the bank, the National Australia Bank, the bank. And I would talk about them rather than naming individuals. I never named the bank manager, which it turns out I would have been wrong to do anyway, because he was away on holidays and didn't know what was going on, or at least I think he didn't know what was going on. I don't know what the background is. I do know that schadenfreude kicks in. Now, do you know the word schadenfreude? Schadenfreude is when you take great delight in someone else who's done the wrong by you getting pissed on by someone else. And it turns out, and I love this, bitchy, ugly me loves the fact that the bank manager's family was taken to the cleaners by the same bank. Ta-da! Yeah, they don't care. He was the bank manager, and the bank still took him to the cleaners. Woohoo! Schadenfreude, I love that word. There's been a fair bit of it this month. I found out a lot of things other people have told me where they've got schadenfreude. And it reminded me of my schadenfreude, which I found out about 6 odd years ago. I think I found out what the bank did to the bank manager, and I thought, beauty. It wasn't just me. Yeah, go sucking that. Suck eggs. Anyway, I never mentioned any individuals' names. And I didn't even think about something like defamation. I mean, my barrister came after me for defamation for a post I'd done on my blog, but he was time barred. So you've got a year after someone has published something defamatory to come after them and get them for it. After that, it's a sad case of stiff shit. Not sure what the law would be if I were to republish those particular pages if I ever resurrected the blog. I'm unlikely to do that, but there would be legal implications. But I'd actually, as soon as he contacted me through Facebook, because we had a closer connection than normal, so he contacted me through Facebook and told me to take the damn posts down, and he's going to sue me and blah blah blah. Mean, make me cry. So I took them down. Still think that was wrong of me, because I still reckon, I had truth on my side. I didn't say anything that wasn't factually correct. And if you don't like it, then stiff shit. You should have done the right thing. And, that's my humble opinion. But I took the posts down because, my brother was still alive at that stage, and I didn't want to make his life any worse than it already was. We make decisions based on what's happening in the world at the time, and I thought that was a small sacrifice to make. In hindsight, it was a big sacrifice. Didn't really, sort me. I would have loved to have, been in court with a defamation claim. I don't care how much money it would have cost me, but that bastard would have been shown up for the prick that he really was. Got it off my chest. Don't bother Googling my case. Most of what the court heard wasn't actually factually correct. That was because my lawyer didn't put the facts in there, and I kept saying, you can't put that in there, that's not right. That's not factually correct. But apparently, I'm wrong. The legal profession said, that's fine. You just do that. It's just par for the course. Don't worry about it. And it's like, don't like that. And I didn't like it. Anyway, so I've got the case in front of me. This is the defamation case with Bose and Bruce and all the others that she was fighting, who were saying horrible things about her. Now, there weren't many that were really, really bad, but what they said was really bad. And I mean, this is in a town of a population of 7,000, so pretty much everybody knows everybody. They've been there for a long time. Their kids are going to the high school there. So, I think she'd been there something like 30 years. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, so when you read a case, it sort of tells you, the orders, like it starts off with, it gives you the head notes, which tells you which court, citation, who the parties are, what's the file note, file number, which division was it in, which proceeding is this judgment in relation to, because you get judgments at all different stages, which was the originating court, so were the documents first filed, where was the judgment delivered, and what times were the hearings. So this was a pretty long trial. It also tells you who the judge was who heard it, and then the orders. And after that, in the head notes, you get the catchwords. And that's what I kind of want to talk about at the moment. Like, what is defamation if you're involved in something, whether it's you're in a parenting battle in the family court and you want to tell people your side of the story. You feel the need, you're so angry about what your ex is doing that you're posting it on Facebook. Or we had this horrible case at work where, the bloke left his wife and, their two kids, including a newborn baby, for another woman, and then they hadn't properly gone through all the process and they hadn't gone through the family court, And then he had originally assigned all of his superannuation to his mum so that his mum would look after the money to look after his kids. And somehow his new girlfriend, who was on and off again, and it was really messy, and she ended up with it, with all the superannuation, and his kids ended up with nothing. And it was really hard for the ex-wife to kind of prove things, and in the end she actually didn't have a win, and it cost her a lot of money. And it was just not a fair outcome. But there were a lot of posts on Facebook where the ex-husband's, who was deceased, his Facebook page had been kept, and his Facebook page and the ex-wife's kind of corresponded. So, there was the right kind of overlap, and, the posts were there. It was all, and, according to his Facebook, his timeline and everything, this wasn't a serious relationship. But according to the girlfriend, this is really serious. I've got all of these posts that show how serious this relationship was. We were engaged. He didn't have the same corresponding post on his. So was he just not active on Facebook? Well, he was. But, they just couldn't prove that what she'd done on her Facebook page wasn't actually a true reflection of the relationship. So you can't use Facebook for something like that. You can't prove positive relationships or disprove a relationship enough. It's really hard. So I found that case absolutely heartbreaking. And I think what was wrong with the bloke ended up being the reason why he separated from his ex in the first place. And according to her, they were talking about getting back together. According to his mum, there's talk of them getting back together. According to his Facebook page, it kind of almost hinted at it, but you couldn't prove it. So it was really messy. So there's that. Like, can you use Facebook to prove something? Yeah, maybe not. You can prove that somebody had malicious intent or was just being an arsehole. There are plenty of people who post absolutely awful stuff. Trying to get comfy again. That, they abuse Facebook, which I think, it's a bit horrible. But if you are a keyboard warrior, I would suggest easing off and starting to sanitise your Facebook now, even though you might not be in any trouble. Stop stirring the pot. Stop posting shit. Stop putting out a persona that is pure evil. Stop putting out that, you're all that. Because if you ever do a post where, middle of the night, you've had a bit to drink, you're really up in arms about something, and you are about to blow, and you go off your tits at somebody, and you name them, and you say what they've done wrong, and how they're an idiot, and why they're an idiot, and they're an idiot. They're no good at their job, they're overpaid, they're absolutely useless, and you keep ranting. You can find yourself in court for a defamation case, because on Facebook you are not seen. Facebook, thousands of people would see your posts. You've kind of got to watch yourself, and you might think, it doesn't matter. I've never posted anything that isn't true. They're all dickheads. Everybody I've ever complained about is a real dickhead. It's the way that you express yourself. It's the kind of stuff you do. It can show that you're a really horrible human being and that you would do certain things and that you meant to say exactly what you said. You weren't misunderstood. So I'm just going to go quickly through the different defamation things in this particular case. only because it's something that I can read so that I can remember, you know, to tell you about why you might not want to be on social media. Don't be on Twitter being a twit. It's like, you know, do all the tweeting you want, but don't be a twit, because it can cost you everything. And if you're already fighting a bank, you don't want a bank employee coming after you. You don't want someone to come after you and say, you know what, I'm done with this. I haven't done anything wrong. Everything you're saying is bullshit, and I'm coming after you. Would they do it? I don't know. Sometimes we think that it is a certain person who's done something when it is something totally different. And if it turns out in a defamation case that you're wrong and you destroyed someone's reputation for no reason, and they can prove a loss, it's, they can show that your comments actually stop them from moving on to another job or lessen their standing in the community. People look down on them now because they're so disgusted with what you've said they've done. Then, if they win, you can be in the deep shit, and it can cost you a lot. So you don't want to do more than one lawsuit at a time, and a defamation lawsuit probably isn't fun to fight unless you can prove that everything you said is absolutely correct. And once you're talking about feelings, and especially, feeling upset, and can somebody prove that they haven't got a job because of your comments? Yeah, possibly. I mean, there's plenty of people who've lost their jobs because somebody has contacted their boss. Oh, they posted this on Facebook and I want you to sack them. It's always funny when people do that and they're actually asking the boss, who happens to be the person they're complaining about, to sack the person they're complaining about, because that's not going to work. And I have opinions about bosses who fire employees for their personal opinions. I'm not a fan. If you can't say as a boss, look, respectfully, I think the opinion is pretty sucky, but they do their job really well and that's what I pay them for. I don't pay them for their opinion on something that it's nothing to do with my company. So no, I'm not going to sack them. I can respect not sacking them. Can't respect sacking someone because somebody else got offended. You know what? Grow up. We're adults. You might be offended. Build a bridge and get over it. And if you're offended that's my position in life, you know what? I don't care. I really don't. I'm sitting here in my not paid for office talking to myself because I'm pretty sure there's no one online watching this right now. If you ever find this and then you get offended, I might have changed my mind by then. I might have met the person that should have been sacked for their opinion. But you know what? Don't fire someone because their political views are different to yours. Don't fire someone because they have said, I don't like this person. Because you know what? You can not like someone just because they're a horrible human being and you're not looking at, what's their history, what's their background, what's their colour, what's, all of these other things that we're supposed to give a damn about. I don't care if you're a good person. If you're a decent human being, I like you. If you're an a-hole and you just abuse people and you use them, I'm not interested. Don't need people like that in my life. I've had people like that in my life. I'm broke because of people like that in my life. I don't care. Oh, look.
Has he been good? Has he been with you?
Yeah. I didn't even notice he was still in. So that was my husband checking on the puppy. There. See? And that's a good person. Because he gives a damn. He didn't know I was still talking to myself in my office, but that's all right. I told him I'd be here maybe an hour, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, so defamation. So to actually be defamation, you've got to publish it. to more than one person, and, something's got to be happening. So the catchwords for this, the first series of catchwords: defamation, publication generally, internet publication, social media. So where the plaintiff sued in respect of comments made on Facebook and change.org, in respect of comments made on where the forums were specifically created to support the plaintiff, where features of social media are considered, where features of social media are part of the context in which imputations are read. So this tells you that there's a fair bit of discussion on this particular thing. So if that's all you're worried about looking up, you can get the case and you can look at it, and there'll be a fair bit of discussion on that. And then the next bit that it deals with is the extent of the publication, and the grapevine effect. Because this was a town of 7,000 people, what was the grapevine effect, Because at first she was just suspended and there was nothing about what was going on. Like, the education department didn't come out and say, all of this happened, so we're suspending her while we consider whether she did or didn't do this. No, they just suspended her with pay while everything was looked at, and it was, kept pretty low-key. But if you've ever lived in a small town or a reasonably big town, you know that is not how it goes. Immediately, everything goes through the grapevine. So the court considered that, whether the grapevine effect arises out of the facts. So, where the publications were available for a limited period of time because they were taken down pretty quick, and where the plaintiff claimed publications had been read by thousands of people, where the evidence did not support a claim that the publication had been widely read, and where the evidence demonstrated a limited grapevine effect. So, and once the case became public, so once the media got a hold of it and the news sort of started talking about it, what did that add to the grapevine effect? So that all came into the equation. So defamation isn't just, what have I said? It really digs in to, what was the overall effect? So then they're talking about, which statements actually amounted to defamation, and what were the particulars of those statements, and were there any imputations? So you can say something, but there's an imputation in that statement. So, if you call someone a big fat git or a big fat lazy git, there's a whole lot of things in that statement that aren't said, but the person hearing it will suddenly imagine someone. So who's a big fat lazy git? It's someone who's, for many people, it's someone who's on the dole, who spends all their money on just getting food and drink, sits around, does fuck all day because they're too fucking lazy to get off their ass and do anything. They're bludgers. So there's this whole thing that builds into this one small sentence. So was the wording of any comments on Facebook intended to carry lots of subtext? So, when you pick your words to, engage in a conversation and you want to stir the pot, what's the words you use? And can those words get you in trouble? Can somebody who says, they defamed me, can they prove your imputations? Some judge will look at that and consider every statement you made in the context. And if, you'll be called to give evidence and all sorts of things will happen. It's really quite interesting. But so there's a description for what they're looking at. So in the context of this judgment, it looks at where the plaintiff sued in respect of comments made on social media, so we know that, and whether the alleged imputations are carried by the words in the publications. Was there really an imputation that the plaintiff, in this case the high school principal, said there were? So you will find a whole discussion on that. You know, did they really say what you think they said? You know, and I mean, it was a judge sitting alone who looked at that. And, you know, one of the interesting things that's on here is, you know, where the alleged imputations contain speculation around the circumstances leading to a school principal being suspended. So they were talking about, oh, well, why did the suspension happen? You know, what was going on? And some people would have jumped in with, well, you know, and then rather than coming out with the, you know, they might have implied things and, you know, imputed things in their statements. So the next lot of catchwords that are in the head note are defamation defences and justification. You know, truth, contextual truth, and triviality. Now, these are really interesting things because for every defamation case you might have a defence. Just like I said, you know, when the barrister threatened to sue me for defamation, my lawyer sort of said, you know, if you want to go ahead and fight it, I'm there for you. Just be aware that we've already got this other thing going, so you might want to concentrate on the other thing. And, you know, he backed down pretty quick when, you know, the lawyer said, oh, by the way, you're out of time. And to me, he sent the judgment where the barrister was suspended for 6 months. So I'm thinking there was more truth to what I was saying than even I realised. So that was, I still would have liked to have gone to court because I think I would have won that. I think it would have exposed a lot more of the dodgy things that he did rather than, you know, showing me to be an ignorant blogger who just went off her tits for no reason. I actually had the justification and, you know, there was truth and there was contextual truth and what I was saying wasn't trivial by no stretch of the imagination, but I think it wouldn't have gone well for the barrister. So that's what's happening. If he ever saw this and he thought, I'm going to have that bitch, come at it, mate. I haven't mentioned your name. It would take great effort for people to find the case and figure out who the hell you are. But, you know, have at it. I don't care. At this point in time, there's nobody listening and that's fine by me. But anyway, so, you know, where the defendants seek to establish defences of justification, contextual truth and triviality, and where the defence of triviality fails. So, you know, where the defence of justification fails, where the defence of contextual truth fails. So they, from reading this particular, you know, all the catchwords, you sort of realise that they tried these defences and the judge didn't buy it. So he didn't say there was contextual truth. He didn't agree with that. Now, the next lot is, you know, they then go on to talk about the damages, general damages and assessments, so in general. So they look at, you know, has damage to the reputation actually occurred? And the reason why I haven't gone with something like Geoffrey Rush, who won his defamation case, is because my channel isn't aimed at people like Geoffrey Rush. It's aimed at you and me who might be on social media and we've got a bean app on it and we want to just respond to things and say, no, you're wrong because, and then bang, 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 we want to tell everybody the truth, how bad this human being is. So it's kind of, what I'm trying to get at is ordinary Mr. and Mrs. can get in the deep shit with the courts because, you know, but they look at everything. And I mean, you know, I mean, this section is really long, so I don't really want to sit here and read it. Although it would be, I don't know, I'll read it. We'll see how we go. So defamation, damages, general damages, assessment in general. Whether damage to reputation has occurred beyond the presumed damage. where there were difficulties isolating the harm caused by the defamatory publications. So apparently, they couldn't identify the actual harm caused, whether prior reputational damage had occurred, where the plaintiff's suspension as principal caused some reputational damage, where there are multiple origins of the plaintiff's hurt and distress, whether hurt and distress arose from the defamatory publications. So something happens to you and it shocks you. I mean, the principal was shocked in this. And then suddenly there's a Facebook page and change.org page, and suddenly it's going off and there's people who support you. But there are horrible comments. And this reminds me of this acquaintance of mine whose son was shot and killed, and it was horrible. And, the court case and everything was really horrible. But when it first happened, from memory, her husband's way of dealing with it is he kind of took himself on Facebook, and he was responding to people who were talking about it on Facebook. And I can tell you right now, when my son was dying, and my son lived. He's fine, he's still with us. But he was in hospital and he was really, really sick and he was dying. We were told he was dying. We were told to prepare for him to not make it to the end of the week. So, having been in that situation, you got no idea what you're doing. No idea. Anybody who says, well, I wouldn't do that, you don't know. You really don't know. You've got no idea. I can tell you that when the shit hit the fan with the bank, and this was back in the day, Facebook was only starting up. There was very little there. I spent a lot of time playing computer games, and that's where I was hiding. And that's where I hid for a long time. Even while I was doing both my degrees. More so when I was doing my Bachelor of Arts. By the time I did the law degree, I really had to cut back on the gaming. But whenever I get stressed, I'll go back to those online games because there's a community there. I regularly sign into them just to say hello to people, because back then, that was the only way for me to really interact with a lot of people. I've got a lot of Facebook friends who I met through these games, and I'm still in touch with them, and that was my way of dealing with it. So I'm not surprised when people after a major tragedy are actually on Facebook interacting with people who are talking about their loved one. And when people talking about their loved one start saying nasty things, then you tend, that adds to a level of hurt that I can't imagine. Reading how horrible other people think your loved one is, and, blaming your child for getting killed. I don't know how to deal with that. I really don't. It's, I started following some of these threads a little bit later, and I was devastated for them. I mean, how can you say that? How can you respond to a parent and put all of that bile out there? It's like, oh no, I hate people. I do. I hate people. I mean, individuals are great. I love my friends. I love meeting people in the shops. But by God, when you're a mob on Facebook, God, I hate you. I really do. I just stop doing that. You are not God's own. You are not judge, jury, and executioner. Just bloody well tone it down. You don't know. You're not the God of all knowledge. You've got no idea what goes on in people's lives. If somebody's lost their loved one, if you didn't like them, just say, look, so sorry for your loss, and move on. You don't need to pile on any shit. Anyway, back to this, because, we want to lose my plot too far. Anyway, so, you know, which of the hurt was actually from what they were talking about and which was from being suspended? It would have been very hurtful to have, you know, after all these years, and this principal had won awards, you know, she wasn't a slouch, you know, people loved her, she was supported in the community generally, and, you know, to suddenly be suspended, I imagine that would be bloody hurtful. And, you know, where the hurt and distress also arose from other circumstances in the plaintiff's life, so there was lots going in. There was apparently a prior suspension for something. Don't know how that turned out. And, you know, there were multiple potential defendants that she didn't sue. So the court talked about it. They wanted to know why, I imagine. So where the fact of multiple not sued upon was relevant to the assessment of hurt and distress. So, you know, how much hurt and distress was there when you didn't get every single one of them? And whether damages awarded must reflect an appropriate and rational relationship to the harms suffered. So the court doesn't just say, oh, you've got a boo-boo, oh, I'll give you $1 million. That's not how it works in Australia. In Australia, you tend to get really low damages awards, and there's lots of things that are taken into consideration. So I used to have people come in and say, oh, you know, so-and-so's defamed me on Facebook. And I'm there, well, what do you want to do about it? Well, I want to sue them for defamation. I'm there, well, what do you reckon you're going to get out of it? And they're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm there, well, what's your job? Where you're working? You know, how many people would have seen the post? You talk them through it, and well, I'm pretty sure that you can't really prove damage. And if your boss doesn't know about it, and your pay hasn't been affected, and your work hasn't been affected, and, you know, a few people are saying, oh, you know, so-and-so said such and such about you, most people who know you take everything negative about you with a grain of salt, unless they're looking for a reason to, you know, not like you. So you sort of have to weigh up, oh, what's the court going to think your damage is? Unless you can prove actual damage to, you know, if your reputation has been hurt to the extent that you won't be hired, hell yeah, you go for it. It's like, if, let's take Geoffrey Rush, you know, there were calls to never hire him again. That affects his bottom line. So his reputation was really tarnished with all of these stories against him that came out. You know, it was affecting his bottom line. It was, his reputation is directly linked to his income, and his income was high. You know, he wasn't paid, you know, peanuts for what he does. So, you know, they look at that. And then, now the next bit, it talks about defamation, damages, general damages, assessment, and then special matters, aggravation, conduct of the parties. So this is where the plaintiffs claim aggravated compensatory damages on the basis that the defendants engaged in conduct that was improper, unjustifiable, or lacking in bona fides. So that just went off. It's basically what it says. Where defendants engaged in threatening behaviour. So, you know, they apparently published threats. I really need to read all of this stuff. I'm not sure if it's still available. I know that the Facebook group was shut down and the change.org thing was shut down. So I think everything that was kept was just the copies of it. And, you know, the stuff that you can download from the servers. Where defendants failed to publish an apology or retraction, where failure to apologise was not unreasonable or unjustified in the circumstances, where genuine attempts were made to remove publications, where retraction was not possible, where a defendant engaged in criminal conduct. So apparently this went criminal. And whether the defendant's conduct towards the plaintiff in the court precincts warranted aggravated damages. So, and then he talks about mitigation. So, the plaintiff settled with 3 of the 8 defendants, and, where the plaintiff settled with a further defendant during the trial, and where the plaintiff had commenced separate proceedings against the government department. So, where the imputations found to be defamatory are substantially the same as imputations for which the plaintiff was already compensated. So are we going to compensate someone twice for the same thing? You've got to kind of look at that. So you can't, if you're thinking of suing someone for defamation, you can't double dip. And if you're being sued for defamation, they can't double dip. So, but the reason why I've done this, and it's really, really broad strokes, I mean, I haven't really looked into it, is because you read a lot of things that online and you're sort of there, oh my God, you're going to be in so much trouble. If you'd said that about me, I'd be suing you. Not a problem at all. And I mean, if you've got something on in the family court and if you're not allowed to contact the other party, and I hate this one. I've got a real problem with this one. If your partner has taken out a family restraining order, so it's a family violence restraining order, you can't contact the other party for whatever reason unless you've got kids and it's about the kids. But sometimes the order includes the kids, which means you are not allowed to contact them directly. So you have to set up a way of contacting your ex. And I used to deal with clients who would come for advice about a family violence restraining order. And I mean, this one guy who ended up not becoming my client because he didn't like what I had to say. I sort of said, look, I can get up in court and I can, do a little bit of mitigation for you, but the bottom line is, he spent his whole time in the interview, which was 3/4 of an hour for minimal fee just to get some initial advice. He kept saying, but I want to know why she broke up with me. And I'm there, even if she tells you, you don't know if it's the truth. She could just as easily tell you a lie. And you don't really need to know why she broke up with you. Just accept she's broken up with you. You're no longer a couple. Don't try to get a hold of her. She said she doesn't want to hear from you. And he'd breached the VRO, and you can go to jail for that stuff. It's like, don't do it. And on Facebook, don't post to their page demanding things. That's contacting them. And I know people do it. And can I just say, don't do that? And if say you're in court with a bank, and one of the bank managers or someone, their Facebook page, don't post on their walls with abusive stuff. Just don't do that. Don't mention them by name. Now, you can say what you like about any business that has over, I think it's 100 people, to your heart's content. Say, the AMPs, the NABs, the ANZs, Telstra, you go for it. You can go on their social media pages and you can, say what a useless mob of dicks they are. Not a problem at all. Knock yourself out. chances are they'll just remove the post, because most of them are gutless wonders who will not address negative comments. Very few would engage and actually say, what's your problem? I know the ANZ does, but I think they might remove the abusive ones. And I'm not a fan of abusive messages. Personally, I think, just say, look, I'm so disappointed with the lack of service by your organisation. It is so unprofessional. I hope everybody dumps you for a better provider. That would be my personal thing. I have been known to go off. Microsoft comes to mind, because I think Microsoft interferes with our property rights. Could be wrong. No doubt I am wrong, but oh my God, I do tend to go off a little bit. But, what do we want to do? I think keep it polite. Don't ever post to someone's personal Facebook page. Don't mention them by name. If they work for a big organisation that you can rubbish, you cannot rubbish individual employees, because their personal rights are bigger than the company's rights, so they can sue you personally. It's messy. But look at this case of the principal. Yeah, the court only gave her $6,000, and by only, I mean only. But think of the stress, the drama. And I watched, the 60 Minutes interview. And can I just respectfully say I was on the principal's side, and I had no sympathy for the parents. I'm a horrible human being. But you know what? Sometimes your kids aren't honest about what's going on in school. I love my kids to death. Horror stories galore. But I know my kids. And sometimes I think the teachers were unjustified in what they did, and I suspect a fair bit of the time the story wasn't quite what I heard. I only ever, I remember one time I did go off at the school principal, who, because I'm not sure if you remember when a little girl was killed when she was dropped off. I think she was dropped off at the bus stop, or she was waiting for the bus in the morning and was abducted and killed and dumped in a farm dam. And I think it might even have been her family's farm dam. So she was only 8. Horrible, horrible story. And it was about a year or two after that happened that my daughter was sick, and I was supposed to have gone to Perth. We lived on the farm. So I decided to stay home. I dropped my son off at the bus stop, which was just at the end of the driveway. I dropped him off 5 minutes early, so I knew the bus would be there, he'd be safe. I had to get back because my daughter was sick. And, he said, don't worry about it, Mum, I'll be fine. He wasn't a little boy. He was, I think he was 11 or 12 or something. And about 1 o'clock in the afternoon or something, I had a call from the next neighbour saying, did you know that he's standing at the end of the driveway? And I'm there, what do you mean he's standing at the end of the driveway? And because he hadn't really wanted to go to school, he figured that if he stayed at the driveway, that I wouldn't drive him into the school. So I raced down to pick him up, and I went to school. And he still tells me that he's so proud of me. He says, I just walked that much taller that day. His classroom was at the other end of the principal's office. And it wasn't a big school, but I'm in the principal's office. And the principal eventually saw me. I kept telling the receptionist, no, I want to talk to him. I want to talk to him now. And eventually he deigned to see me. And he was really narky with me, and I'm there, you know. Why wasn't he picked up? Well, I dropped him off 5 minutes early. Why did the school bus leave him behind? And this principal, you know, went all smug on me, and he says, well, you need to check your time with the ABC so that you know exactly the right time, because your time's wrong. And they're bullshit. My time's right. And he was there 5 minutes early because I make sure that they get on that bus, and I'm always early. And that night I got a phone call from the bus driver, and she was so apologetic. She really apologised, and she said, look, you're always early. I just assumed the kids weren't on the bus that day. I'm so sorry. And then that's all right. You know, I just didn't like his attitude. His attitude really sucked. But, yeah, the son still reckons he's really proud of me for what I did. And I'm still embarrassed. Oh, God, I'm so embarrassed. But there you go. We all do things that we're embarrassed about. And that one was one of my moments of glory, or not. So I noticed that there isn't a chat showing up on this one, but there's a chat showing up on that. But they've only posted a link to, you know, do you want to become famous? Well, not sure. Really not sure about that. Anyway, that's my probably 2.5 cents worth. Just don't do it. Don't go off your tits on Facebook. Don't say people's secrets on Facebook. Don't carry on like a 2-bob watch. Don't harass people on Facebook. Everybody has this idea that going to court is easy. Having to deal with lawyers, don't do it. If you can avoid it, don't deal with lawyers. I'm a lawyer. I've had to deal with lawyers before I became a lawyer. That's why I became a lawyer. If you can avoid it for the bullshit in life, just do that. Take the path of least resistance. If you want to vent, can I suggest, get a pen and paper and write a letter to that, whoever it is you want to write about. Put all of the vitriol and bile and all the nasty shit on that, and then burn it. Just get it out of your system and let it go. The trouble you can get into, I mean, as I say, the couple who were the first and second defendants in this case, they apparently went bankrupt over this. And why would you do that? And I mean, they had to pay bugger all to the principal. They did. In the greater scheme of things, they paid bugger all. But they still went bankrupt. It doesn't take a lot to get you to that point. And if you can avoid bankruptcy, always do that. I know that everyone says it's easy and you're out of it really quickly, but don't do that. If you can avoid it, avoid it. So I thought I'll probably leave it at that. I just hope you take my advice. This isn't legal advice. Absolutely not legal advice. This is one human being talking to another. Don't vent on Facebook and get yourself in trouble. Now, my Facebook page is locked down, and I still don't do it. Every now and then I'll comment on something, and half the time I'll realise that, they've got a public page, I'm going to get rid of that. So I do a lot of self-censoring. But, you know, and people don't believe you anyway. As in, they don't believe that whoever's done the dirty on you is that bad. I was always told that banks don't do that. Yeah, bullshit. As we found out. Anyway, hope you don't mind the cursey words, because I'm rather fond of them. It saves you a lot of trying to be nice, you know. sugar might be a really nice word, but we all know what we want to say. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I know it's only a short one today, but hope you got a little bit out of it, at least to the extent that you're not going to get yourself in trouble on Facebook or Twitter or, getting banned off those platforms is the least of your problems. There's so much more you can do. And, defamation suits are not fun. Even if you're like me and you think, I know I've got the facts to take you down. I'm sure that's what these parents thought. I mean, with me it's a little bit different because there was plenty of evidence to show that what I had actually written, and I'd written it politely. I had politely pointed out where, things went against me that should not have gone against me. I was polite. I was writing a blog post. That's a little bit different to the context of, going off your tits on a Facebook page saying, or a change.org page going off and saying, you're all wrong, this person is so horrible, using every expletive under the sun and, expressing more than simple disdain. Anyway, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to go and have some tea and I'm actually wearing my pyjamas under this shirt, so already in my bed. And it's only 6:30 at night. I'm exhausted. I've had a big day. Anyway, have fun. I'll catch you tomorrow. Same time, same